In April 2021, a woman in Baltimore named Carol received a phone call that every adult dreads. Her mother had passed. She had maybe 12 hours before the hospital needed to transfer the body. She had never done this before. She didn't know what anything cost. She didn't know what she was supposed to ask for. She was crying. She called the first funeral home that came up in the search results. The director was kind, patient, and he said all the right things. He told her they would take care of everything. 3 days later, Carol signed paperwork totaling $11,400. She put it on a credit card she is still paying off today. What Carol didn't know, and what almost nobody knows until it's too late, is that the funeral she arranged for her mother could have cost $3,000. The casket she was guided toward had a wholesale cost of roughly $900. The embalming that the director implied was legally required was not required at all. The burial container they told her the cemetery demanded was not required either. The cemetery later confirmed it had no such policy. Carol didn't get robbed. She got played professionally and systematically by an industry that has spent 60 years perfecting the art of charging grieving people as much as possible at the exact moment they are least equipped to push back. This is how the funeral industry works, and this is who profits from it. There are approximately 19,000 funeral homes operating in the United States right now. Last year, Americans spent an estimated $21 billion on funeral services. The median cost of a funeral with viewing and burial is $8,300. Add a burial vault and you are at nearly $10,000. That is before flowers, obituary listings, or a reception. For context, funerals have historically ranked as one of the 3 or 4 most expensive purchases an American family makes over the course of their lives, alongside a home, a car, and a college education. Unlike those purchases, you do not get to comparison shop. You do not get to walk away and think about it. You do not get to come back tomorrow. The hospital needs the body moved today. The clock is already running. And the industry is structured deliberately to exploit every second of that window. In 2015, a continuing education course called Upselling Without Upsetting the Client was approved by 27 state licensing boards for funeral directors to use toward their professional certification. Read that again. 27 states approved a course titled Upselling Without Upsetting the Client as legitimate professional development for the people who stand across a counter from grieving families. The course teaches funeral directors to ask about a family's budget early. Then the course instructs directors to say, "We are going to stay as close to that number as possible." It conditions the family to relax. Then directors are advised to introduce upgrades by saying things like, "We might go a little over your budget, but this particular option will go perfectly." The target overage is 20%. The course also advises directors to present families with 3 price tiers: low, middle, and high. The reasoning is explicit. Most people do not want to appear cheap or reckless, so they will choose the middle. So you price the middle at whatever you actually want to sell them. This is not an underground document. It is continuing education. It is how funeral directors keep their licenses, and the lines they are trained to deliver have been refined over decades. This casket is what most families choose. Your mother deserves the very best. Don't you think she'd want something that honors how much she meant to you? Every one of those phrases is designed to transfer the guilt of grief onto the cost of the casket, to make the act of not spending feel like a failure of love. There is a lie that consumer advocates call the single most common in the funeral industry. It goes like this: your state requires embalming. In almost no case is that true. No state in the United States requires routine embalming for every death. Some states require embalming under very specific circumstances. For example, if a body is being transported across state lines, or if burial is significantly delayed. But in the overwhelming majority of situations, embalming is completely optional. It is also not free. It typically costs between $700 and $900, and it generates one of the highest margins in the business. In 2023, when the Federal Trade Commission conducted an undercover phone sweep of more than 250 funeral homes across the country, investigators found funeral homes explicitly telling potential customers that local law required embalming. In states where it does not, that is a federal violation. It is also, to be precise, a lie. The Federal Trade Commission also documented funeral homes telling customers that a casket was required for cremation. That is not true. Funeral homes also claim that a burial container was legally mandated. In most cases, it is not. 1 in 4 funeral homes investigated was found to have serious violations of the basic consumer protection rules governing the industry. In 1963, a journalist named Jessica Mitford published a book called The American Way of Death. She spent years investigating how the funeral industry operated. What she found was a system of systematic exploitation, hidden prices, manufactured necessity, emotional manipulation, and markups that bore no relationship to actual cost. The book caused a national conversation. The FTC spent the next 2 decades building a regulatory response. In 1984, the funeral rule went into effect. It required funeral homes to provide itemized price lists, to disclose costs over the phone, to accept caskets purchased from outside vendors, and to stop implying services were legally required when they were not. It was, on paper, a genuine set of protections. 40 years later, 1 in 4 funeral homes is still violating it. Here's why. When the FTC's undercover investigators find a funeral home breaking the rules, the standard outcome is not a fine, not a public disclosure, and not a formal enforcement action. The standard outcome is a referral to something called the Funeral Rule Offenders Program, a remedial course run by the funeral industry's own lobbying group, the National Funeral Directors Association. Violators pay a fee, take the course, and their names are withheld from the public. This is a privilege extended to no other industry under FTC jurisdiction. Not banks, not car dealers, not healthcare providers. Only funeral homes get their violations buried. The Wall Street Journal reported that more than 500 funeral homes have cycled through this program since 1996. Their names have never been released. You cannot look up whether the funeral home you are about to walk into has a history of violations. Now add the private equity dimension. In 1962, a Houston funeral director named Robert Waltrip had an idea. Instead of running one funeral home, he would buy many. He pooled their back-end operations while keeping separate storefronts and local names. Families would think they were dealing with the neighborhood funeral home that had served their community for generations. They were actually dealing with a corporation. He called it Service Corporation International. Today, SCI owns more than 1,500 funeral homes and 400 cemeteries across North America. Its annual revenue in 2024 was approximately $4.2 billion. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange, and it is still buying. In the third quarter of 2024 alone, SCY spent $123 million acquiring 10 funeral homes and 2 cemeteries. The company targets, by its own description, premier locations in major metropolitan markets. When SCY acquires a funeral home, it often keeps the original name. The staff may even stay. But a 2017 study by the Consumer Federation of America found that prices at SCY and acquired locations average 47 to 72% higher than the local market rate. 47 to 72% for the same services in the same building with the same name on the door. Private equity and corporate chains now own roughly a fifth of all funeral homes in the United States, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation analysis. The consolidation accelerated during the pandemic years When death rates rose and private equity firms went on a buying spree, there is no more captive customer than a grieving family. Here is a fact that the funeral industry has spent decades trying to suppress. You can buy a casket anywhere. Under the FTC funeral rule, funeral homes are legally required to accept any casket you bring from any source. They cannot charge a handling fee. They cannot refuse delivery. Costco sells caskets. Their best-selling model goes for around $950, including shipping, and can be delivered within 24 hours. The comparable casket at a funeral home typically costs between $3,000 and $5,000. When this became widely known, funeral directors developed a term for it internally, the Costco problem. Industry trade publications ran articles about how to protect the revenue line when a family arrives with an outside casket. Some funeral homes found a workaround. They raised the basic services fee to recapture the lost markup. The casket costs funeral homes roughly $400 to $900 wholesale. They charge you $3,000 to $5,000 because grief does not comparison shop. There is one more mechanism worth understanding: the prepaid funeral plan. The pitch is compassionate on its surface. Plan ahead. Lock in today's prices. Spare your family the burden. It sounds responsible. Millions of Americans have signed up. The regulations governing prepaid contracts vary by state. In some states, the money is held in a trust and protected. In others, funeral homes can access prepaid funds as operating capital. When those businesses are then acquired by a corporate chain, the contracts transfer, but the prices guaranteed may not be honored. In 2009, the cremation company Neptune Society paid $630,000 to Colorado to settle accusations it had inflated the value of prepaid merchandise, charging $349 for an urn worth approximately $13, specifically to avoid setting aside the required trust funds. The prepaid funeral industry is largely unregulated at the federal level. When a reporter asked a spokesperson for Service Corporation International why ECI does not post its prices online, the spokesperson said, "We're not the Walmart of the industry. We're the Ritz Carlton. The Ritz Carlton doesn't put their prices online. Ritz Carlton is optional. You can choose a different hotel. You can stay home. Death is not optional. The 12-hour window the hospital gives you to move a body is not optional. When you are standing in a funeral home the morning after losing your mother, you are not a hotel guest with choices. You are a person in pain who needs something done immediately and has no idea what it should cost." Here is what all of this adds up to. The average American family overpays for a funeral by somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 compared to what they would pay if they had time to research and compare prices. That money does not go toward better service. It goes toward margin. It goes toward the corporate acquisition fund that bought the funeral home you were standing in. The funeral rule was written in 1984. It has not been meaningfully updated since 1994. The FTC is currently reviewing whether to require funeral homes to post prices online, something they have been allowed to resist for 40 years. The industry's own lobbying group has consistently opposed it. Their argument is that online pricing would be confusing. The argument against transparency from the industry that profits from its absence is that transparency would be confusing. Carol, in Baltimore, eventually found out what her mother's funeral should have cost. A friend walked her through the itemized bill. She did not ask for her money back. She said she did not have the energy to fight. She was still grieving. She said the thing that made her most angry was not the money. It was that it happened at the exact moment she was the least able to think clearly. That someone sat across from her while she was crying and saw in that an opportunity. "I trusted them," she said. "That's what you do. You just trust them. That trust is the product. Your grief is the leverage. And until the rules change, the industry will keep collecting."